Hello and welcome. In this explainer, we're going on a historical journey to really understand the roots of the modern state of Israel. We're going to be looking at Zionism, the political and ideological movement that was, well, the engine behind its creation.
Okay, let's just dive right into the big question we're tackling here. How exactly did the modern state of Israel come to be in 1948? Now, the answer isn't simple, and believe me, it starts way earlier than you might think. To get a handle on this modern political movement, we first need to rewind the clock. I mean, way back, and explore the ancient, deep-seated connection between the Jewish people and this very specific piece of land.
So, let's start with the name itself. The word Zionism actually comes from Zion. As our sources explain, Zion was originally just the name of a hill in Jerusalem, the very spot where King David's palace and the first temple stood. But over time, it became this incredibly powerful symbol for the entire Jewish homeland and its spiritual heart.
Okay, let's just pause on this for a second, because this slide visualizes thousands of years of history. You see King David setting up his kingdom around 1000 BCE, then the building and later the destruction of two holy temples. These huge events, especially the Roman destruction in 70 CE, kicked the forced exile of the Jewish people into high gear. This incredibly long, turbulent history of connection, loss, and displacement created this persistent, centuries-old longing to return to Zion.
All right, now let's fast forward to the 19th century. We're going to see how this ancient, almost spiritual longing morphed into a modern political movement, all thanks to a new set of problems brewing in Europe.
Our sources point to a really critical turning point. By the late 1800s, anti-Semitism was just rampant across Europe. The brutal massacres, the pogroms against Jewish communities in Russia in the 1880s were especially horrifying. And they convinced a lot of people that trying to just assimilate into European societies was not a real path to safety. They needed a permanent fix.
And this quote, it just perfectly captures that new way of thinking. It's a feeling famously pushed by Theodor Herzl, an Austro-Hungarian journalist who's often called the father of modern Zionism. He basically argued that the so-called Jewish question was a national one, and the only real solution was for the Jewish people to take control of their own destiny and establish their own state.
So you've got the problem identified, you have a major figure leading the charge, but how does an idea in a book become a real, organized international plan?
The game changer was the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland back in 1897. And listen, this wasn't just another meeting. It was the birth of a political machine. Herzl got about 200 delegates from all over the world in one room, and they walked out with one single, crystal-clear goal: establish a legally secured home for the Jewish people in Palestine.
The incredible power of this movement came from how it wove together two really powerful ideas. On one side, you had that ancient religious foundation, the belief in a promised land and that deep spiritual tie to Zion. And on the other, you had a very modern, very practical political foundation, the right to self-determination as a direct answer to European persecution.
Now, this slide lays out the long and winding diplomatic road they had to travel. Let's walk through it. At first, they tried lobbying the Ottoman Sultan, who ruled Palestine at the time. That didn't work. But then, World War I completely redrew the map. This led to a huge breakthrough, the Balfour Declaration in 1917, where Britain threw its support behind a national home for the Jewish people. After the war, the British Mandate made it official, putting Britain in control. And finally, after World War II, the whole issue ended up at the United Nations, which led to that famous 1947 partition resolution.
Okay, let's move on to the culmination of all these decades of planning and diplomacy, and the immediate, absolutely transformative consequences it had for the entire region.
So, in 1947, the UN came up with a recommendation to partition the British Mandate of Palestine into two states, one Arab, one Jewish, with Jerusalem set aside as a special international zone. As you can see from the numbers here, the Jewish state was allocated just over 56% of the land. Now, the sources are clear that the Jewish leadership accepted this plan, but Arab leaders rejected it completely.
And this was the moment. On May 14, 1948, right as the British Mandate was officially ending, the Zionist leader David Ben-Gurion stood up and declared the establishment of the State of Israel. 51 years after that first Congress in Basel, the core goal of political Zionism was now a reality.
But the birth of this new state was anything but peaceful. Immediately, and I mean immediately, after the declaration, armies from neighboring Arab states invaded. The conflict that erupted became the 1948 Arab-Israeli War,
and it completely reshaped the map and the demographics of the region.
And one of the most tragic and lasting outcomes of that war was the displacement of a huge number of people. Sources estimate that around 750,000 Palestinians either fled or were expelled from their homes in the territory that became Israel. This created a massive refugee crisis that remains a central and unresolved issue to this very day.
So after tracing this long chain of events, all the way from ancient history to modern politics, what's the key takeaway here?
Well, it really boils down to this. The Zionist movement was the indispensable engine behind the creation of Israel. It provided the core ideas, the political organization, and the diplomatic push that managed to turn a centuries-old dream into a modern state in 1948.
So this explainer has laid out the historical how, the chain of events and ideas that led to the formation of modern Israel. But we want to leave you with this final question to think about. How does this incredibly complex history of nation building, conflict, and displacement continue to shape our world today?